This is the PlayStation 2, one of the finest consoles ever created and the one gaming system that was present throughout my entire childhood. Though I've gone through many PS2s in my lifetime, and I seriously do mean many, I've always made sure to have one plugged in for whenever I want to crack open a fantastic library of games available to me. This countdown is to games that I grew up playing and not really about my favourite games on the system, but this time it won't just be me talking. Instead, I'll have a few like-minded YouTubers chiming in and talking about their own PS2 memories. With that out of the way, let's begin. Starting with our first game, and something that I remember clear as day, is James Bond 007 Everything or Nothing. I wasn't too interested in third-person shooters when I was a kid, but my love for anything James Bond trumped my disinterest for that genre of game. On the surface, Everything or Nothing probably looks like any other game from the time, but if you dig a little bit deeper, you'll find a varied and fun action game that's very much worth giving a go. Because the game is so incredibly varied, not only do you have numerous missions to play through and tons of weapons and gadgets at your disposal, but the game spices things up a bit by introducing stealth, driving, brawling, and other cool segments into the mix. All of this adds to the overall feeling that the developers actually cared about making a decent game, which is not what you usually expect with licensed video games. But these are things I kind of took for granted back when I was a kid and didn't really think much of it. Though something I didn't take for granted when I was a kid was the inclusion of an all-star cast with Brosnan voicing Bond, John Cleese as Q, Judi Dench as M, and Willem Dafoe as the main antagonist, and, well, we all love a bit of Dafoe. Everything or Nothing is a great creative example of what can be done with a license such as James Bond, and you know what? They went completely nuts with it. The game is a globe-trotting adventure with the main focal point being about nanotechnology, terrorism, and how the two combine and mesh together. Very much Bond and completely entertaining throughout. It also doubles as a fantastic co-op game too, in which a friend and yourself can play through a side story that runs alongside the main plot. There are also a bunch of extra modes and features to be found in the game too. Before making this video, I hadn't played this game for years and years, but getting back to it has proved to be a really fun time for me, and not only because of nostalgia, but the fact that it really is a good game. But it would be silly to say it isn't without its faults, because the game can be a bit difficult at times, and I don't remember the checkpoints being all too fair either, but as long as you're not faffing about, I'm sure you'll survive. Just do what Bond does and you'll be okay. As of the making of this video, new copies of the game are being sold for around £10 on Amazon or even under that. You really have no excuse not to pick this one up at that price, unless you hate James Bond or something. Well, time for the next game.
Hey, I'm Dan from Infinite Backlog. We're a three-man group who primarily do game reviews of new, old, and odd games, so feel free to check out our channel if you're interested. But my first pick for this PlayStation 2 countdown is Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3. I clocked hundreds of hours into this game growing up as a kid. From either playing with friends in duel modes, spending countless hours in Dragon Universe mode unlocking the 40 plus characters available in the game, or earning Zenny in the tournament mode so I could purchase more skills and moves, or creating my own episodes in my head in what-if scenarios, like the lonely, single child I was. If you're a fan of Dragon Ball Z and have an itch for a Dragon Ball Z game, then Budokai 3 is without a doubt one of the best games released under the Dragon Ball licensing. From the incredible cel-shaded visuals such as the auras around different characters as they power up, to the beam struggles, animations, to planets completely getting destroyed by super moves, Budokai 3 is a gorgeous looking game on the PlayStation 2, and thanks in part to the art direction, still holds up nicely today visually. But if you're itching for the HD treatment, then you're somewhat in luck. It also did get released on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in the form of the Dragon Ball Z Budokai HD Collection, which features both the original Dragon Ball Z Budokai and Budokai 3, but the soundtrack for both games is somewhat butchered and replaced, and some of the moves and scenes in both games are also censored, to remove any blood and over-the-top violent moves. However, Budokai 3 also features the full cast from the English dub reprising the roles for all the characters. In fact, if you want a good laugh, be sure to check out Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 Behind the Screams on YouTube, if you want to see dudes screaming into a microphone for this game. I even had my copy of the game signed by the voice of Goku, Sean Schemmel, a few years back. For the most part, Budokai 3 is also a fairly solid 3D fighting game as well, sort of reminded me of a faster, slightly more janky Tekken. It features plenty of advanced combos to learn, juggling, grabs, and other things you'd expect from a 3D fighting game, while also including things you wouldn't expect, like weird rock paper scissors style mechanics in the form of the Dragon Rush mode, or how easy it actually is to win in the tournament mode against the AI if you simply just knock them out of the ring. But aside from these minor gripes, as I said, it's still easily one of the best Dragon Ball Z games around all these years later, and still plenty of fun to play. You can find it fairly easily online, ranging from around $20 to $40 USD. If you can, I highly recommend grabbing a copy of the Greatest Hits version, or whatever's equivalent, as it includes some extra skins like King Piccolo and a longer-haired version of Trunks, or if you don't mind censorship, then the HD collection is fairly common as well for around the same price range. But with all that said, it's time for our next game.
Hello fellow bin raiders, my name is Alex and I run Indie Bin, a channel dedicated mostly to indie gaming. I do fully scripted satirical reviews about the weirdest, wackiest indie games I can find, and if you're looking for something more informative, I offer more objective reviews and previews on various indie games and mainstream games alike. But for now, let's discuss my childhood, minus the usual therapist chair and silent judgment. Truth be told, I was a bit of a hipster when the PS2 first launched. Having brought into the terminal hype that was the Dreamcast, I was fortunate enough to have a generous friend, or sucker, if you will. Almost every weekend that came by I was able to borrow his PlayStation 2, and a wide variety of games he had for it. Ratchet and Clank 2 Locked and Loaded was one of them. The reasons Locked and Loaded, also known as Going Commando if you're a filthy yank, is on here and not the original are twofold. It's the one I played first, and it's the superior of the two. You see, Ratchet and Clank 2 was my bridge between third-person platformers I'd grown up with on the PlayStation 1 and the budding sense of wanting more guns in my video games, even if they turned people into sheep or ripped people a new one. Sadly, the Dreamcast was devoid of such platformers, save for the Sonic Adventure titles. The simplicity of the Ratchet and Clank series as a platformer was bolstered by the crazy amount of weapons to choose from and dispatch enemies with. But what really hooked me in was the experience system for weapons Locked and Loaded offered. Using a weapon more often allowed it to upgrade into a more powerful version of itself with different abilities, which gave you a sense of progression and gave you a reason to use different weapons. And more upgrades were available in consecutive runs of the game, meaning you had a reason to return even after you had finished a playthrough. For those who like the sound of mascot-driven games mixed in with wondrous platforming, stupidly inventive weaponry, large levels to explore through, and secrets galore, I can't recommend Ratchet and Clank 2 enough. The game has small challenges like a gladiator arena and flying sections, and I swear to God they are exceptional. These being examples of modes you'd probably avoid in most other games are a riot in Locked and Loaded. The sheer level of quality by developer Insomniac is unlike any other, showing no hindrance from their years of solid gold with the Spyro trilogy. Not to mention the hilarious storyline and lovable characters. For the younger members of the audience, perhaps your only exposure to Ratchet and Clank was the god-awful movie that was released late last year. What a shame that is on the legacy of a once titanic franchise. Locked and Loaded vastly improved on what had been established in the original. It is the true merit of a sequel. Travelling between planets made the game seem like a real adventure, guns were stupidly powerful and hilarious to use, the story was on point and character interactions were side-splitting. As cheesy as the dialogue can be in Ratchet and Clank games, I can proudly say Locked and Loaded still has me chuckling to this day.
In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill. You promised you'd take me there again someday, but you never did. Well, I'm alone there now, in our special place.
What's up guys, I'm Jared from Avalanche Reviews, and just like your friendly neighborhood broski, I have an immense appreciation for Sony's little black obelisk. In my years on YouTube, I've covered a lot of games, but looking back on my past videos, I've noticed that almost half my reviews are PS2 games. So yeah, you could say that me and the PS2 go way back, but you know I've had an even longer love affair with the Silent Hill series. Ever since that fateful day me and a friend decided to rent the first Silent Hill and pop it into my PlayStation, I've been hooked. I remember me, my brother, and our friend Gary sitting there in the glow of the TV, completely out of our depths and trying to act like we weren't terrified. Ever since then, the name Silent Hill conjures up memories of staying up till 4 or 5 in the morning, scared out of our minds and trying to piece together the story of the game as we understood it. It seemed like even long after we reached the end of Silent Hill, the game continued to have an effect on us. We would share theories on exactly what the hell was going on in that foggy little town and discuss the messed up dreams we would have. The three of us would continue hanging out and playing video games up until the day me and my brother had to move out of Tennessee and back to the city we were born in, Miami. When we arrived, it took a long time to stop feeling sad over the loss of our close friend, but the release of a brand new Silent Hill game helped strengthen our resolve and inspired us to stay in touch whenever possible. Me and my brother would call Gary while we were playing through Silent Hill 2 and describe what was happening to him. Which may sound archaic, but you gotta remember, back in my day, fancy screen sharing Skype calls were science fiction as far as I was concerned. So we would rant and rave about how it played with our minds exactly like the first one, and I even ran my PS2 through my VCR to record gameplay footage to mail to him since he didn't have a PS2 yet. For this short piece of time, it was like the three of us were together again, and Silent Hill 2 was the catalyst for that. It always struck me as odd having such a dark, somber game give me such happy feelings, but I think that's exactly why we play video games, to make lasting bonds and memories. So for me, the name Silent Hill 2 will always be associated with a great friendship and, you know, pants-pissing terror.
Alright mate, Metal Gear Glenn representing, and we have Fatal Frame 3 The Tormented on the table. Yes, 2 is probably better, but I put this in because I think this entry in the series gets an unfair rep, being accused as a lazy retread by some people, but I don't think it is. It's got much more varied gameplay thanks to the 3 playable protagonists, each with their own strengths, weaknesses and abilities, as well as a bit of stealth dotted about. If you've played any survival horror game, Fatal Frame 3 will be familiar gameplay wise. Sliding puzzles, fetching keys and stiff controls, but so what, it's a great game, better than Fatal Frame Maiden of Blackwater anyway. Ugh. The core of it is still taking photos of ghosts with an ancient camera like a terrified hipster photographer, and that's fine, it's still tense waiting until the last second to take your shot for max damage. It's a cool organic way to build suspense. Seeing the spirit up close after you've taken the shot is just disturbing. That expression of pain and fear on their face gets ingrained. And there's some brilliant scares about. There's the obvious jump scares, sure, but there's some scares that you might not even notice. Ghosts hide within the environment. A good one is where one hides in a wardrobe and looking at the shoes you can see its feet. The kind of thing you think you spot in the corner of your eye when you're home at night and nothing's there, but in this case there is. There's some great sound design as well. The ghostly whispers and creaky floorboards create a really spooky atmosphere. The smashing visuals combine with it nicely with great lighting, and the animations on the ghosts look really floaty and eerie. It all goes to making a pant-pissing marathon. I also really like the bits in between levels where you go back to main character Ray's house. At first it just feels like a normal home, but as you progress through the game it gets progressively more fucked up, like Silent Hill 4, but you know, not shite. The story is also well told, it gets pretty dark and it's a lot more coherent than Fatal Frame 2 I think. The characters are a bit wet, not showing much emotion and being a bit thick, but Ray's motivations are clear enough even if she does act a bit brain damaged. You can totally play this if you haven't played the other two, but there is a couple of nods in there if you have. It's a banging survival horror game, so give it a whack.
Got it.
Sir, she's got the package. Move in. Deadly force.
Enter the Matrix is a pretty mediocre game, but if you hadn't played it and had only been following the hype surrounding it, well, you probably would have thought it was going to be fantastic. This game was a huge deal. It's essentially an interactive spin-off film following Niobe and Ghost. Yeah, you remember them, don't you? Anyways, one of the big draws for this game before its release was that it contained a whole hour of live-action film that was written and directed specifically for the game by the Wachowskis. What does this mean? Well, if you are a die-hard fan of Matrix back in the day, then you basically had to purchase this game to get the full scope of the story found within The Matrix Reloaded. And looking at the sale figures, you probably did. This game sold around 5 million copies. If you listen to what the people making the game were saying, then you probably would have heard things like this.
Everybody has been able to work together to make the most incredible game you've ever played. You gotta see it. I mean, you gotta see it. When you grab hold of those controls and when you start punching those buttons, I mean, you'll see you can do things you've never done before.
So, yeah, it's not hard to believe that this game could have been something worthwhile. But it wasn't. This game is the poor man's version of Max Payne, and though I loved Enter the Matrix as a child, I never really noticed the numerous faults found within. I wasn't able to get many games as a child, and because of this, I made the most of every game I had. Enter the Matrix was essentially a super game. It had platforming, shooting, fighting, driving, and even hacking. As I said before, this was really trying to be the game that did everything, and though it tried, it didn't really do everything all too well. It's a shame too. This is kind of like a dream game, isn't it? The Matrix is a fantastic action film, and if there was a game that could perfectly mirror that in an interactive medium, then it probably would have been fantastic. But that's just a theory. A game.
When Grand Theft Auto 3 first launched in 2001, I was infatuated with it. I remember hype around the game after release was at a fever pitch. It was insane. Pretty much every kid in school was talking about it, and every gaming outlet I read or watched was too. I still remember watching a blonde Jeff Gertzman's review for it on GameSpot and his use of the word iller.
Look, and just the behind the back perspective just really makes the game a lot iller.
Me, of course, only being 9 years old at the time, that Christmas I hatched a plan to get myself a copy. I knew the guys at my local Future shop, think Best Buy for you Americans, and EB Games, wouldn't dare let me get a copy, even with my dad purchasing it. But I knew the local pawn shop nearby wouldn't care at all. So later that Christmas, my dad offered to buy me some PlayStation 2 games. So while we were at Future Shop, I told him briefly, hey, Grand Theft Auto 3 is cheaper used at the pawn place across the street. My dad, of course, not caring too much about video games or the ESRB rating for that matter, agreed. For perspective, I had no idea if they even had a copy at the pawn shop. I just assumed after 2 months of the game being out, people might have already been trying to pawn off their copies. Thankfully, I was correct. Despite some slight scuffs on it, I was walking out with a copy of GTA 3 that I still have to this day. After Christmas break, I was the cool kid among my group of friends for like a week, and it never got old inviting them over just to see their jaws drop each time I showed them something new in it. We experienced a game that changed our perspectives on what an open world game could achieve, but not only did it change ours, it changed the industry's perspective. Grand Theft Auto also ended up becoming a massive point of contention for mainstream media, and even a platform to stand on for those holier-than-thou types. But it also showed that video games as a culture and as a product were maturing. As for the game itself, Grand Theft Auto 3 was immensely fun, but notably in so many different ways. You could play the game as intended and delve into a series of missions with incredible voice acting with Hollywood talent in it such as Michael Madsen and Frank Vincent, or you could go on a complete rampage and use cheat stats as different weapons or spawn a tank, or you could do side objectives and crazy Tatsy-inspired missions, or collect the hidden packages in the environment and explore. Games with this much freedom and a sense of scale were almost unheard of in the mainstream. The soundtrack in GTA 3 is pretty solid as well, with an incredible mix of in-house produced music and licensed tracks, Listening to Push It to the Limit, for example, while going on a rampage never got old. Of course, with the popularity of GTA 3, it can be pretty much found everywhere nowadays, from mobile devices to PC to releases on modern consoles such as the PlayStation 2 emulated version on PlayStation 4. But if you're looking for a copy for your own PlayStation 2, you can easily find one online for less than $10 USD. But now it's time for our next game.
Before the likes of Modern Warfare 17, another excuse to shoot minorities, the FPS genre was about as serious as a clown on fire. If you think back to the original days of Doom and Duke Nukem, FPS games were fast-paced, colourful, exciting, and never took themselves too seriously. My foray into the relatively unexplored world of FPS games was the TimeSplitters series. And we all know that the second one, like the Lord of the Rings Two Towers, was the best of the trilogy. I will admit it was close between 2 and Future Perfect for me, but I cannot deny the impact 2 had at the time. What can I say? Co-op campaign, a literal fuck ton of multiplayer split screen modes, an actual shitload of zany weapons to use, a genuine crap bundle of characters to play as. If the PlayStation 2 could clock playtime as publicly and as easily as the Steam library can today, I'd be embarrassed with the amount of time I spent on TimeSplitters 2. The story revolves around Sergeant Cortez in a desperate war with a benevolent alien race known as the TimeSplitters, who are hell-bent on the destruction of humanity. They raid a space station where the time crystals are kept, the material used to manipulate time and space. Once Cortez and his partner take control of the main portal room, he has to travel through various time periods to foil the plans of the TimeSplitters before they can destroy the past and end humanity's future. The premise alone gives rise to various levels the player travels between and certain objectives that must be met, with more difficult objectives being added to higher difficulty settings. But every single level feels unique and well designed, introduced with a little story to follow and a plot to solve as Cortez takes control of various characters within each time period. The overarching story does seem a bit dark and foreboding, but with the funny, over-the-top animations and on-point writing, everything is very comedic and enjoyable. As I said before, TimeSplitters doesn't take itself too seriously, and that's very refreshing. Coupled with the dangerously addictive challenge mode that allows you to unlock more characters and weapons for multiplayer, TimeSplitters is an incredible single player experience on its own, but the multiplayer is where the game truly shines. No regenerating health, no iron sights or knife kills, the fast paced movement and the fluid shooting of TimeSplitters harkens back to a day long since forgotten where you and 3 mates would sit on a sofa and pretend not to glance outside your own little corner of the screen. I ask you now, what have we sacrificed for convenience when 16 hormone-addled preteens share their favourite racial slurs while questioning the sexuality of people they've never even met? How can a 14-point killstreak tactical nuke compare to picking Monkey on Ice Station and bricking people in the head? Why would I want to press X to pay respects when my friend and I can play Harry Tipper and Kitten Celeste while trying to stop the evil Dr. Carlos on Atom Smasher? I'm sorry, that turned into a rant at the end there. And perhaps my fandom goes a bit too far when after 15 years I can recite almost all the cutscene dialogue off by heart. But it's games like TimeSplitters 2 that sour me to the modern FPS genre we've all forced to become accustomed to. 15 years is a long time, and I apologise if I'm aging you at the moment, but to this day I'm still humming the Return to Planet X theme. Oh fuck, sorry, still on. Sorry.
A lot of times it's a console's launch titles that decide whether or not it'll sink or swim, and coming hot off an insanely successful console generation, Sony was in no danger of slipping by unnoticed. During the actual hype tornado that swept the US, I remember seeing video clips of the bouncer on everything from E3 footage to trailers airing on Tech TV. Being a fan of both Squaresoft games and beat-em-ups, my excitement was in overdrive waiting for the PS2 to release. But since I got my PS2 almost a year after it came out, I didn't really get to play it as soon as I would like. In fact, I was so busy catching up on all the games that released in the meantime, I didn't get around to actually playing the bouncer until about the end of 2002. By that time, I'd almost forgotten about how psyched I was to get my hands on this bad boy. But when I closed that disc tray, all those memories came flooding back, and I was in heaven. Right off the bat, the game's main characters look cool as hell. Now, I know that might clash with what you're seeing on screen right now, but you have to keep in mind I have this disease that causes me to disagree with snarky game critics and appreciate an overabundance of belts, zippers, and weird colored spiky hair. Beyond fashion though, this launch title would have been perfect for selling me on the immense power of the PS2, as this is easily one of the slickest looking games on the console. I think the combination of a buttery smooth frame rate and a generous sprinkling of post-processing effects like bloom and motion blur made the bouncer not only stand out as a launch title, but as a PS2 game in general. Past all the glamorous visuals is gameplay that can best be described as, Alright, listen, on paper the gameplay is pretty much garbage, but for some ridiculous reason, I absolutely love it. I mean, sure, the controls are all kinds of loose, and an enemy knocked in the air by one of your teammates has the ability to send you ragdolling across the stage, but this absolutely mad chaos just puts a smile on my face. Plus, there's something inherently pleasing about Tekken-style air juggles in a Squaresoft game. Of course, the story is absolutely laughable, but let's be fair, it would actually be a disappointment if it wasn't. Overall, the Bouncer is a game that has no right being this fun. It's sort of like Square mixed a bunch of really dumb ideas together, and somehow, against all odds, ended up coming out with something great. Well, at least it's great to me.
Do you love kicking people in the stomach repeatedly until they throw up? In the virtual world, I mean, you crazy bastard. Well, The Warriors is the game for you. It starts before the events of the Warriors film, showing the Warriors rise to power as well as delving into each of the characters in the gang, and keeps going until the end of the film. The Warriors all get characterised really well, and you get to see the formation of the gang by Vermin and Cleon, as well as how other characters from the film join the group. It's quite cute without the excessive violence anyway. Gameplay wise, it's an open world-ish 3D brawler with easy to grasp mechanics, though there's plenty of depth there if you want it. In brawlers like this, I like it to feel good when I twat someone, and my god does it feel good in this game. Slamming someone's head into a wall or smashing them right in the chops has a real good sense of impact. There's some really exciting set pieces dotted about the story missions, especially the chase sequences. There's about 500 angry gang members chasing you and you have to leap across buildings, down alleys and all sorts. It's genuinely quite tense. You also have to cause mayhem, and that's exactly what it sounds like. You smash the shit out of everything, cars, windows, people. It's quite therapeutic in a I should worry about my mental health way. A thing I've always respected about the Warriors is the enemy AI. In most melee combat games, enemies crowd around you, politely attacking one at a time. But in the Warriors, no, they will use their numbers to batter you, but with the moveset available, you can skillfully wreck them, so it doesn't come across as cheap. It looks the part as well with its dark, gritty environments, reminiscent of the dark, horrible back alleys and streets of the film. Everyone has the appropriate 70s clothes and hairstyles, which is unfortunate as 70s fashion trends should be punished with the highest penalty. All of this game can be played local co-op as well, and it's a right laugh with a mate. You can get this on the PS4 as well for 11 quid if you're interested. It plays and looks fine on it, so have a pop.
Well, that was one hell of a video. 10 games, 5 YouTubers, including myself, and quite a few memories. If you've enjoyed this video, then please check the pinned comment down below to check out the channels and content creators who helped make this video happen. They all do wonderful stuff, and since I recently hit over 1,000 subscribers on my channel, I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate than a large collaborative effort. Anyways, I'm TheFriendlyBroski, and I'll catch you guys next time.